Welcome back inside the Now Morning Show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here with us. Yesterday we had a little chat with a law professor about mandatory vaccines and if it's good, bad, is it legal, illegal. And yesterday we saw that the Employers Consultative Association, they put out a statement about it. And this morning they had to chat with us about what mandatory vaccinations mean, if that's even a thing that we should be considering, if it's legal, if it's not legal, how employers should be treating with it, etc., etc. I want to welcome this morning the interim CEO of the Employers Consultative Association, Stephanie Fingal, as well as the chairman, Keston Nanku. Good morning and welcome to the Now Morning Show.
Good morning and thank you.
Morning.
Really a pleasure.
All right, so let's start with you, Stephanie Fingal. What is the ECA's position on mandatory vaccination?
So let me start off by saying this is an evolving thing. And we have said this before, and I think we all understand that. There was a time when we had no vaccine. We now have a vaccine.
Right.
There was a time when Trinidad and Tobago did not have the supply of vaccine that we wanted. We now have a supply that seems adequate to the best, availability for our population that needs.
We have plenty.
So that we are in a position now where we do have the vaccine.
Yeah.
We also have some scientific data with us now that says the vaccine helps to reduce the severity of the illness associated with the virus. And the vaccine also helps to reduce the spread of the virus. It does not prevent you from getting it, but there is some reduction in the dilemma that we have been faced with over time. We have also been faced with the closing down, the shutting down, the actual full closure, temporary closure of many businesses. We have been faced with unemployment. A lot of our people have no salary, no income for months, almost more than a year. The government has tried to assist in certain places. We also faced with an economy that is not very strong. But we also know that vaccination at this point in time, there is no legislation for it. A mandatory vaccination. And therefore, there is still that option, as the Prime Minister has enunciated, for persons to voluntarily take it. We encourage them to take it, but there is no legislation mandating it. Save and except an employer might have had a term in their contract that provided for such a thing, you would find that an employer will not be able to mandate that because, as we have heard, unilateral variation of contracts. But we also have our OSH legislation, which requires safety and health. By employees have a responsibility for that, for themselves and for others, and employers also have that responsibility. So when we listen to all of these things, we have a great mix. Our position is that in the context in which we now exist, we encourage every single person, employees included, who can and who's not prevented through medical reasons also, to take this vaccine once offered the vaccine. They may consult with their doctors and so, but to take it. What we are seeing is that in almost every country where they try to resuscitate, revive, go back to things as normal, they have had to pull back.
Yeah.
And the only thing we know from the science at this point in time is that the vaccine would assist. So our position is employees, employers encourage each other, employers encourage employees, employees encourage employees to take it without forcing anything, because we want for us as employers and as citizens to return to some sense of, decent living, earning incomes and being able to live. And I'll stop there.
Right. Now, it's interesting because you're saying that employers should encourage employees and employees should encourage their fellow employees. But Mr. Nanku, can you tell me, should employers be forcing employees to get vaccinated? As in insisting upon it very strongly?
Well, I wouldn't use the word force. I would use the word moral suasion and persuading as far as exhaust that process. Because in exhausting that process, you get away from the word that you're just using, forcing. Because as Stephanie alluded to, whilst the OSH Act clearly indicates a duty of care, you have reasonability, you have a situation where high risk, and all the rest of it that comes into play. So it cannot be done in isolation. Consideration must be given to what is reasonable in a particular set of circumstances. Doing risk assessments because doing a risk assessment is going to be critical. We are early days yet in the world. You see, like, for example, Italy, as Stephanie alluded to, countries that have reopened. And, just yesterday I was speaking to some colleagues in the UK, and they were telling me that, yes, there are some people still wearing masks and doing the social distancing. So that process is going to be based on as the confidence levels increase, But it's important for us to appreciate that you need to be careful as an employer not to do anything that can be that one can reasonably conclude that it's a variation in terms of the existing terms and conditions of employment. And this is why moral suasion is so critical in driving the process.
I love that you try to be politically correct about it. Moral suasion rather than force. And I appreciate that. But tell me something. Let's get into the workplace itself, right? What happens in a situation where vaccinated employees do not want to work with unvaccinated employees? How do employers treat with that situation? Or how should they? Stephanie, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, go ahead, Steph. Go ahead.
Okay, and
I'll just jump in.
Yeah. We do have, Mr. Nanku spoke of the OSH Act, I spoke of the OSH Act. And we do have provision for when employees are not satisfied that their workplace is safe and secure. They may approach the health authorities. There's a process for that in the Act. And once it is deemed safe for return to work, as for any other contamination, you would find employees have an obligation to return to work. Now, because there is the employer has no authority by law at this point in time to demand a vaccination, he is in a bind. So for employees to insist on that, that is going to be almost impossible for the employer to do.
Right.
He cannot force people to take the vaccine, as we just said. He cannot take them to take the vaccine. But the employer, of course, as Ms. Nangle also said, you must do a risk assessment. So what he must do, or she, is understand the environment in which he's operating, the proximity of the workers, the level of sanitation, and having done that risk assessment, having ascertained what exactly should be done to prevent infection as far as possible, he then must enforce whatever policies and procedures he puts in place to ensure that there is compliance and the opportunity for infection is very, very limited, if not almost non-existent. And when he has done all of that, if he were to be approached by the inspector, the OSH inspector, as to whether his place is safe for employees to work, those employees who are opposed will have a challenge because they are expected to return to work. And where an employee chooses not to want to come to work, there are options for that employee as to whether he wants to take some leave of absence, some vacation leave. There are choices.
Okay.
But the employer, as far as is reasonably practicable, will do what he can to protect those from the vaccinated, the unvaccinated. But remember one thing, the vaccination does not prevent infection, and all those protocols, WWW, must be maintained if at all infection is to be prevented.
Definitely.
Rockus, if I may just add
sure.
to, if I may, because I think it's important to put this on the table where the employer is concerned and the duty of care. Whilst the employer has a duty to provide a safe working environment, that it can be viewed as an implied terms of employment of his or her contract, which ought not to be disregarded. So you can't, and this has to do with the variation and how it can be viewed. So I have a duty to provide a safe working environment. And if I do that, and I seek to honor that obligation, then it may be arguable to arrive at a position that the terms and conditions of employment are not being altered. So I just thought I should put that on the table because there must be a balance. You can't ask me as an employer to demonstrate and to hold to my obligation because the Act also gives the employees the right to refuse.
Right.
So if they have the right to refuse, how can you now, come back and I am providing a safe working environment? How can you now come and claim, an unjustifiable.
Yeah. So then, in that case, should we be making the vaccines mandatory? Then is that the conversation that we should be having?
Well, I would say for now we do not have the legislation that supports it.
I know, but should we be looking into that legislation now? Is what I'm asking.
Definitely, just as the world is in fact doing. We need to look at that because from a public health perspective, consideration must be given to the collective interest of the individual.
Right.
So the answer is yes, particularly in high-risk jobs,
exactly.
healthcare workers.
This is what I was going to ask, because, when it comes to things like going to school, for example, when you're going to school for the first time, there's certain vaccines that you have to be able to enter the school system. Is that the precedent that we should be following when it comes to this particular vaccine, Stephanie?
It is an evolving situation, and those decisions were not made arbitrarily. In some cases, it took almost 50 years by the time they started giving vaccines and so on. Remember, there's a difference between immunization and vaccine.
Right.
Vaccine helps to reduce, as opposed to immunization would stop the getting the thing. So that it will take some time. The whole world is looking at this. The WHO, which is supposed to be the experts, they are also considering. And our Prime Minister also said that we have to look at whether the variant attacks us. And if in our country, we are a small country, if we get the attack of different variants and it starts to spread like wildfire, we will have to make some decisions about mandatory vaccine, particularly in certain environments. Because the key to this thing is, and we must not forget, and employees, employers, citizens, getting the vaccine helps us return to a life that we all want. We complain about the lockdown, we complain about children, we know it's a fact, mental health. And so this is not just punishing people by saying we want you to get the vaccine. This is about helping everyone return to a life that we enjoyed to some extent.
Exactly.
And a new approach to it as well.
Because
there is an individual responsibility, for every single person to see it.
Added to all that, if this virus continues to be infectious and to spread, like you said, we can go back into situations where our basic rights are suspended again because of the need for the overall collective to heal.
Exactly.
All right.
And it's not just rights. We our livelihood. People need, this is how life is, the current world that we live in. Mm-hmm. You need a job, you need a business, you need to earn income, to earn revenue, to live.
To live.
The money is not falling from the sky.
So it's not growing on trees.
And then look at it. There's something else that we haven't spoken about much. The healthcare professionals.
Yeah.
They are under pressure. And if you would just sit back and think, what am I doing when I allow myself to probably get it, or, I'm cavalier about it. These people are under pressure.
But Stephanie, there are some healthcare workers who are not taking the vaccine either. So that's a whole other conversation that we'll get into.
That's
but unfortunately,
we
don't have any more time this morning. I want to thank you both for joining me. It's been a very interesting conversation. I hope to continue it. So thank you very much, Stephanie Fingal, the interim CEO, and Kester Nanku, the chairman of the Employers Consultative Association. Thank you guys so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
You're most welcome.
Enjoy the day. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys. So